Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hello and welcome to Aggressive Negotiations, the Star Wars podcast that is dedicated to exploring the philosophical nooks and crannies of the English muffin that is the Star Wars galaxy. I am one of your hosts, Jedi Master John Mills, and with me as always is my dear friend, Jedi Master Matthew Rushing. Matthew, how are you today?
I am doing all right, John. That is about all that can be said for today.
There you go. You are one with the Force, but not in that bad discorporeal Obi-Wan sort of way, but in the, attuned with the Force sort of way, right? That's how you're feeling, right?
Yeah, we'll say that.
Good vibes all around. Well, in an effort to smash those good vibes, I wanted to ask you a question today. Something that I think actually probably a lot of fans have really sort of like tried to chew over time, and it's this. Do you see any way for the Clone Wars to have been averted?
Wow, that is a doozy of a question, my friend.
It is, isn't it? It's because there are so many things that go into it. So let me narrow the focus. Let's take it from a couple of different angles here. The first one, I'll pose it this way. Everything that has transpired from The Phantom Menace to Attack of the Clones has happened, and we're up at the arena in Geonosis. Anakin, Padme, and Obi-Wan are in the arena. They're about to be thrown to the lions, like the early Christians, as it were, to a screaming and happy crowd. You're at that moment. You're Mace Windu. How do you avoid the Clone War from happening?
I think you need to be faster with your lightsaber, and maybe come with a little bit more backup on that balcony. So it's not just you trying to arrest Count Dooku by yourself. And I think that is one of the ways you could have, taken it down pretty quickly. If this was how it should have ended, all of the Jedi land on that spot instead of all around the arena.
So instead of dispersing in a show of force, every Jedi walks through that tunnel and is like, "Hey, what's up, man?"
Exactly. Yeah, like Jedi land on that tunnel. There's, Jedi starfighters, that are facing in the arena. They come down into the arena and they're facing that nice little outcropping that Dooku's standing in.
Okay.
And then you have a few Jedi, just maybe 2 or 3, who go down and help rescue the hostages there. But the rest of the Jedi are all standing there taking Count Dooku out. That pretty much I think solves the problem.
Okay, so let me ask 2 questions as a follow-up to then. Okay, don't you then still have the hostage situation with at least Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Padme in the arena, where they can still roll out the droidicas and have them surrounded? And number 2, don't you still have the problem of the arena full of the Geonosians? What if this arena full of the Geonosians, you're all concentrated in one spot, decide, let's all gang them. They can't kill all of us. Let's go in and kill them.
Well, see, and that's where I think the plan is brilliant, because all of those Jedi can easily take out the leaders of the droids. The moment those leaders aren't there, who are the droids following? No one. So you take out Newt Gunray and Count Dooku and Jango Fett. What do you have left? Nothing. And the Geonosians, if we remember correctly, once the battle really starts, they all fly away. They leave. They leave.
Right.
They leave the battle to the rest of them. They're like, we're not in it for this. We're in it to get paid to build a Death Star. So, I think that's a good way to, again, you end the battle. I mean, it's more cinematic to have all of the Jedi
Sure.
all over the place and all of them igniting their lightsabers in different areas. But seriously, maybe if he had just brought like 3 or 4 or 5 Jedi with him, not all of them, but, they could probably take Dooku down and the rest of those guys on that balcony, I would say pretty easily. Because Dooku's good, but he's not that good.
Now, speaking of this police action you're seeing here, I get what you're saying. They show up and they basically surround the leaders, and they can, even if the Geonosians revolt, they can say Poggle the Lesser is done if you guys make a move. The Jedi basically become the hostage takers. So we'll table sort of that discussion about whether that's the Jedi way or not. We'll get to more of that later. But Mace Windu puts his saber to Jango Fett's head first. Did he make a mistake in not putting it to Dooku's neck first? At this point, they know Dooku is the leader. They know that people are looking to Dooku. Is it that Jango Fett was the greater threat, or, which, I mean, honestly seems sort of dismissive of Dooku, because you would think, wow, Count Dooku's leading he's possibly a Sith Lord and all of this stuff is going on. Shouldn't the focus be on Dooku? I mean, I agree with you as a baseline. Windu going up there alone is, arrogant posturing in a way. It's him saying, you're just going to go with me because, I mean, he's outnumbered from the get-go. He's got a Sith Lord and a bounty hunter right on him, even if the other guys are useless. Is there a scenario where you see it as justified to take sort of a thought from Shatterpoint, an excellent book dealing with the question of what the war did to the Jedi? Is it justified for Windu just to straight up either kill Jango, just behead him right there, or to, even if you don't kill Dooku, cut off his arm when he's not looking and be like, all right, you can't duel now, so give up?
I think that is why I came up with the idea that I did, because, doing it that way doesn't negate the Jedi principles that you have, because obviously I think Mace going up there by himself, I wouldn't say it's just posturing, but I think he is giving Dooku the ability to surrender like a gentleman, saying you're surrounded, we've got you, just come in quietly and nobody has to die. I think he's banking on the fact that, remember what he said earlier, Dooku was once a Jedi. He couldn't assassinate anyone. Mm-hmm. And they're still banking on that in a lot of ways, I think. And so doing it the way that they do is predicated on Dooku still having a part of that old Jedi code in him. What they don't realize is how far he's gone to the dark side, how far away from that he is. And, Obi-Wan's transmission as well was also cut off. So they don't get the whole story. They don't know exactly what they're going into. They just know it's bad, and Dooku's kind of a part of it. And so I think they come in with a certain set of expectations of who he is, but they're not correct. And but I still think, it is a little bit wiser tactically to always come in with a little bit stronger hand, especially if you feel like it's going to turn into some aggressive negotiations.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, now see, it's interesting because while you're talking, I'm having a thought that I don't know if I've really pondered before. Is it possible that the Jedi were treating Dooku initially with kid gloves because he was a Jedi? Like if it hadn't been Dooku leading up the Separatists, if it had been just Newt Gunray or Poggle the Lesser, we saw how Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan approached dealing with the Trade Federation when they were being a bunch of jerks about it. They just went up, they turned on their lightsabers and like, all right, we're going to wreck the joint. And we're going to come up there and we're going to storm the bridge and we're going to take you out or we're going to take you hostage. Is it possible that Dooku is given this opportunity to surrender because of his Jedi past? Are they treating Dooku differently because of his Jedi training, because of some sort of emotional attachment to him?
I don't think it's emotional attachment. I think it is the hope that Dooku still has enough Jedi code in him.
So not so much kid gloves as banking on the idea that he knows that, okay, the jig is up, your fun time is over, come back and get your punishment, and we'll try to work out everything later. They're not seeing him as coming back out with, okay, well, I'm going to start a war over this. But doesn't that speak to a short-sightedness on the part of the Jedi? Because they show up, I mean, Yoda's already on his way at that point with the forces from Kamino. They're showing up in force, no pun intended, like hard on the heels of this. That army is showing up no matter what. They're already on the way. Unless I suppose there's some way where Windu can call Yoda and be like, yeah, you don't need to come down. You can just stay up there in the transport ships. We're all good.
He's texting Yoda. No, we got it. It's
right.
good.
Yeah. He's like, and that's when the fight starts, as he looks down to start texting Yoda. And that's when Jango Fett gets away and, oh, no, see, I could go.
Don't text
Star
and
Wars
fight. Jeez.
Exactly. Oh, maybe he'd have it built into his lightsaber. Anyway.
Texting on your lightsaber. Hold on, exactly. I got to read this text.
That's why they have to recharge the lightsaber so often.
Man,
the heavy texters.
Just so draining on your lightsaber. Yeah. It's ridiculous.
Exactly. Well, yeah, we'll never. Let's not even talk about the Jedi that have, like the games.
God.
On there
Anakin
to keep them occupied during hyperspace.
Will not stop playing, the pod racer game. So his lightsaber never has power. Not only does he lose his lightsaber constantly, but it also is always out of power. Oh.
Right. Do they have something like Find My Lightsaber?
Also Find My Jedi.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's all built into their little communicator.
Oh, gosh.
Well, okay. Back to the more serious question. Okay, so let's say that Geonosis happens, okay? Happens as it does in the movie. Is there a way for the Jedi to back it up and lead the way toward peace after that battle and sort of like unwind the war?
Man, you really have got me thinking here, because I'm wondering what could they do? And I don't know, maybe this is radical, but what if the Jedi had not become the generals in the army? What if they had let the army fight the battle and the Jedi continue to do what Jedi do, which is try and keep the peace on planets? And, you know what I'm saying? Like, what if the Jedi had not gotten involved so that they could continue to do what they did and at the same time find, basically, what if they just became the secret agents? They're doing what they normally do, but they're also looking for the clues about who started this war and why it's going on to get to the bottom of it so they can stop it that way. I don't know. Maybe that would have been a way for them to get this resolved more quickly, because they wouldn't have been so focused on trying to do something that they're not doing. They're not soldiers. They're peacekeepers.
So you send you send out the clone army, whether by conscription or promotion or whatever. You get actual military-minded people leading the army and the Navy, and then the Jedi act as sort of the MI6 of the galaxy.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, they continue to do what the Jedi do, and that allows them to be able to still, I think, be more one with the Force. To sense what's happening, because they're not embroiled in the war, and gives them the opportunity to hopefully hunt down who's responsible for starting this war, and also stay more true to their principles by helping the downtrodden, the needy, that kind of thing. So
like lead refugee, relocation efforts, guard transports that are moving people from war zones to sort of like peaceful havens and stuff like that. I like that. I really like that thinking a lot.
Continuing to keep the peace on Republic planets. I mean, that they're still part of the Republic.
I think that's a fascinating thought. I think that is exactly right. So it almost begs the question of, how did the Jedi get so? Man, I mean, it doesn't highlight a question so much as it highlights the brilliance, I guess, of Palpatine in that he manipulates the Jedi into thinking that is their role, that is what they're supposed to be doing, when the wiser among them should have realized that their job is to do what you're saying.
Well, and see, I think that this really comes down to the question, and the ultimate, to me, the ultimate way to not allow the Clone Wars to descend into what it becomes is for the Jedi to have not been the protectors of the Republic, but the protectors of the galaxy. You know, that they're more than just one type of government. They're more than just devoted to one planet, basically, and one system, that they're above that fray. And so if that had happened, you know, way back when, you know, then I think that the Jedi wouldn't have been in a place for a war like this to make them feel like they need to be responsibly active in it, because they're not dedicated to the Republic, they're dedicated to the Force.
So I'm totally tracking with you. I think that actually your answer is, and I'm not the least bit surprised that you would come up with such an elegant answer. I've known you long enough and well enough to know that you have a tendency to find some really clever and unique considerations that get overlooked by a lot of us other fans. And I think that you've really hit the nail on the head, because I was hoping, all honesty, to trip you up, because I was thinking about it of how, you know, the war starts, how do they step back from it? And I think that it's such an elegant and direct answer of yours to just say, okay, well, the war started, great, you guys go fight your war. We're not going to be involved in it, though. You know, we'll help keep people alive if things, you know, go down, but we're not gonna go out there and actively manage campaigns and the like. Because, I mean, you could make the argument that using the Force to anticipate your enemies and fight in battles basically makes them a dark side army. You know, and Palpatine is able to use them to go out and pacify the entire galaxy, so that when he flips it over to an empire, everything's already taken care of.
Well, and I understand the reason for them thinking that they can do what they end up doing, which is being a part of the war, which is, I feel like they think that they're going to be saving the most lives if they're involved. But what they don't realize is just who's behind it and why it's being done. And the whole thing is just to manipulate them to let go of those principles slowly and surely, so that, yes, they are, the whole galaxy gets enthralled in this war, and it really breaks apart the Jedi from the inside out, you know? And when you really are able to have people systematically destroy their principles, thinking they're doing the right thing, it literally becomes the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Okay, so as sort of a follow-up to that, but approaching it from a different angle. We all know that the Jedi have been, you know, blind, and the galaxy is descending into chaos and schism and those sorts of things. From another angle, I want to ask you, in light of The Force Awakens and what we know from the text of the film and also some of the supplemental materials that have come out, do you view the fight between the New Republic and the First Order, do you feel that we've seen another tactic that might have been advocated having to do with the Separatists, but flipped on its script a little bit, where the First Order, the New Republic is happy with just pushing them to the outer rim or to, you know, whatever sector of space that they're in, and saying, we're not going to engage, we're just going to let them alone? Do you think that the Republic has success in averting the Clone Wars if they take that, or do you think it inevitably leads to war, just the way that it does in The Force Awakens, where you're just letting your enemy build power and they're going to strike at you just at a later date?
I think that inevitably leads to even more destruction. I mean, it's exactly what happened in The Force Awakens. Oh, no, we don't need to deal with them. They're nobodies. They're the JV team. Don't need to worry about them. They create, in those 30 years, a weapon that can destroy the entire Republic in one fell swoop. And so, that's what happens when you don't face evil and call it for what it is. And, it's an interesting thing because this time, Snoke somehow is able to bring down the few Jedi that are around even before that happens. He's able to corrupt and destroy that before it happens. So he has even a better opportunity to make his victory secure. And so I think that's what's going to make this so interesting is we're almost back in a Clone Wars type era and a original trilogy type era put together. It's like both of them together. And it's really interesting because it's still going to come down to the Force users, and that's going to be a really interesting thing because, Snoke and Ren on one side and hopefully Rey and Luke on the other, and who knows, we'll find another one. So I think that just makes it really interesting. It comes down to the 2 versus 2, and they're still deciding the fates of the galaxy.
What's fascinating about the Clone Wars is there is a piece of text in Attack of the Clones where the Chancellor says, I will not let this republic be split in 2. It's stood for 1,000 years. We later get, another statement from C.O. Bibble saying that there hasn't been a full-scale war since the formation of the republic. So at least this version of the republic has stood for at least 1,000 years that they know of. And could preventing the Clone War would it just be kicking the can down? So let's say the Clone War doesn't happen, right? And the Jedi are, wiped out from some other way. Or even the Jedi aren't wiped out, but the Sith aren't wiped out. Basically what I'm getting at is if the Clone War does get stopped or postponed or doesn't happen, does it just happen in what we would now consider the original trilogy era? Does it just happen in the Force Awakens era? So, is this Clone War, what we call the Clone War, incontrovertibly inevitable? Is it just inevitable that the galaxy will descend into this war? It's just a question of when.
I think it all really still comes down to the Jedi and where they have placed themselves within the Republic over those 1,000 years and slowly moving away from who they used to be to who they become and becoming an order which is built in and on a planet that is decaying from the inside out. And they're built on top of that. And obviously the metaphor, very clear that that's happening to the Jedi as well. They've lost their connection, I think, to the Force and to the living Force because they're not around anything living other than people. And they've lost their connection with the people because they've become a little bit elitist. They're not living among any, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's this huge systematic problem that has happened with the Jedi. And it's led to this ability of Palpatine to destroy them the way he does. And I think that became just kind of an inevitable. And so I don't think you would have really pushed it much either way. It's, yeah, I mean, I don't think you would have really ended up with it going too many years into the future. I think it would have just ended up happening just because of where the main people who could have stopped this are. And Palpatine is a genius and realizes this very, quickly in his life and is trained to be able to do this, and he takes full advantage of every system that's set up. And really, it's a system that's set itself up to fail because it's gotten so comfortable in its malaise.
So one last question, one last permutation on the question for you. The Phantom Menace, it really is, in a way, the start of the Clone War. It was supposed to spark it. Like that was the whole intent of Palpatine, was that this was going to be the moment where the war started. And it goes sideways because of a young man named Anakin Skywalker.
And Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan Kenobi, yeah.
Well, the Anakin is the one that like throws it all out of whack for him, like ends his plan by, getting rid of that droid ship. But if Valorum never sends the Jedi and just says, this is a dispute, we'll have this out in the Senate, we're not going to force this resolution, this blockade is illegal, and we'll hash it out elsewhere. Is that the last point? It basically is the Battle of Naboo the real start, and that's where we should be looking at the beginning of the Clone War, as opposed to the more full-scale breakout down in Attack of the Clones. If the Battle of Naboo is averted, does that potentially affect whether the Clone War happens?
Well, that's an interesting question. I'm going to have to jump to the Clone Wars and the Yoda arc, where we learn that Palpatine has been at this for a very long time, setting these things up. And we learned where the Clone War, where the Clone Army comes from, happening 10 years prior, right before all of this happens on Naboo. So he's really setting everything up there. I feel like Palpatine knows Valorum enough to be able to use him in this plan, basically, without him realizing it, and that he would send the Jedi because he trusts the Jedi. And it is interesting because the question you asked, can it be postponed? I do think that it gets postponed because obviously Palpatine's timeline is to have everything begin. I mean, even Darth Maul, again, talks about in the Clone Wars, begun they have, and I've missed them.
Well, I mean, in Phantom Menace, at last we will reveal ourselves to the Jedi. At last we will have our revenge. Like this is their coming out party. They're expecting things to go way differently than they do.
Right, exactly. And they aren't expecting Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon to be able to stand up against Darth Maul, and they're not expecting, like you said, Anakin to be there to do what he did. I mean, again, Anakin is the maverick in the whole situation that just completely throws everything out of whack, but also becomes the thing that will be what Palpatine can truly latch on to. Becomes basically Plan B. So,
yes.
Like he had Plan A, and that was Maul and everything happening on Naboo, and then it was Plan B became Anakin in those 10 years, and he was willing to wait. And so I think that's what's so interesting is that Palpatine he's just so smart. He's always ahead of the game, and he's able to roll with these punches that have been landed at him. But again, like I said, it is just kind of inevitable because of the decay of the civilization and where it is. I mean, and that's one of the most important things about the Phantom Menace is when Obi-Wan talks about that idea of symbiosis, and we're all linked, and you have a galaxy that cares nothing for anybody but themselves. People are only out for themselves. They don't care. That's why the bureaucratic system is falling apart, the democratic system is falling apart, and all of these trade unions and federations are destroying things from the inside out, and Palpatine just takes full advantage of all of that. And, it's when you think about it like that, doesn't that sound familiar, John?
Well, it does. I mean, the way that I approach it, though, is I think that if let's take Anakin out of the equation. Let's say Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan don't go, whatever. I think Naboo, let's say Maul succeeds. There's no Anakin. He kills Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, and the Sith have come out. There's a big thing. The war definitely starts there. I almost wonder if, because I'm unsure on the quote-unquote canon timeline, but Dooku leaves tied into Qui-Gon's death. And I'm still a little fuzzy. I don't think, maybe he cancels the order if it's already been placed for the clone army. Like he sends Sifo Dyas back with with the invoice, and he's like, okay, we know we don't get the deposit back, but stop growing the clones. That's good. That's good.
Or he uses them as his, first round of troopers for his grand new empire.
Well, I mean, but the thing is, they wind up being on, so many different permutations to ponder. But I'll tell you, it's been fun, really fun pondering this. I think actually it's so fun to play What If, because it's really I think, and I believe you agree with me, that one of the reasons that you and I love the prequels is that Lucas knew when to be less explicit with things so that you could engage it on your own intellectual level and you didn't need supplemental materials. And it spurs, Attack of the Clones came out how many years ago, and we can still sit here and debate, well, how could this have been avoided? How could that have been avoided? And a more explicit film would have just said, this is what happened, this is what happened, this is what happened. Whereas we can sort of play with it and debate, well, what if this character had done this a little bit differently? Like, I think it's a testament to the strength of the prequel storyline.
And on top of that, I think on the other side, Lucas has done such a good job of rooting this in a sense of history and an understanding of it that you can piece together what he didn't tell you and that it does make sense. And I think that's what makes, all of Star Wars so interesting is the way in which George had such a reverence for what has happened before and what I think he thinks, and a little bit like Battlestar Galactica, what will happen again. This has all happened before, and this will all happen again because we don't learn from our mistakes. And I think that was what was so fascinating, especially as we're talking about, episode 1 and 2. We see that. We see it now. And that's why it is so interesting to play the what-if game, because the what-if game in Star Wars is very similar in a lot of ways to the what-if game in our own lives these days. So it is truly fascinating the amount of material that George created that is so relevant today as it was years ago, and I think will continue to be relevant till the end of time and Jesus comes back. So, which
according to Futurama is, I believe, 2263.
Oh, okay.
So we've got a little while to go. Yeah. I think the movies can last until then.
But you know what, John, that people can do while they're waiting for Jesus to come back? We all like to collect things as geeks. And, one of the best places to collect things these days is with Loot Crate.
As a matter of fact, the Nerd Party Network has paired up with Loot Crate. And we're offering a special discount to listeners of this show and the network. If you go to lootcrate.com/nerdparty and enter the code NERDPARTY, you can go ahead and you can sign up, you can subscribe, and get a little treasure box of wonderment sent to you on a monthly basis. And they have everything from T-shirts to different collectibles to trinkets to things you're just not going to find, in your travels throughout the galaxy trying to prevent war. They have a different theme each and every month. And if I'm not mistaken, Matt, the theme coming up is
the future.
So if you go on over to lootcrate.com/nerdparty, enter the code NERDPARTY, you get your box of the future.
Which is great because what it does, John, is that it helps out the Nerd Party Network and Aggressive Negotiations. Now,
which we would appreciate.
We totally
very much.
would appreciate. Well, in another way that you can help us out, and we would really appreciate, if you're listening to our show in iTunes and you'd like to help our show grow and help more people find us, hit us up in iTunes and give us a star rating and review, because what that does, as people are searching in iTunes, the more star ratings and reviews that we have, the more people can actually find us in iTunes. So we'd really appreciate you doing that for us. And if you do, we will definitely mention you on the show and give you a shout out, because we want to say thank you for you spending a couple of minutes doing that for us, because we appreciate all of you who are listening, because you know what? It's not as much fun if nobody's listening.
And Matt, I know that another way that everybody can interact with the show and help the show is go ahead and interact with us online, whether with one of the show accounts or personally. So you can reach out to us on Twitter, both of us, through Twitter at the Jedi Masters. And you can go over to the Nerd Party Facebook page at facebook.com/the Nerd Party. And you can interact with the Nerd Party on Twitter at Join Nerd Party. And Matt, where can they find you online? Where else can they get at you?
They can also find me on Twitter at MattRushing02. They can also find me answering emails with you, John, at an@thenerdparty.com. So if you enjoy the longer form emails, and we actually got an email from listener Daniel, so just want to thank you so much for writing in, and we are going to be responding to you post haste if we have not already by the time this drops. So thank you so much for interacting with us all the different ways that you have. And of course, I'm also on the Trek FM network. You can find me doing The Orb with Chris Jones, talking about Deep Space Nine. I'm on a show called Literary Treks with Dan and Bruce, where we talk about the books and the comics of Star Trek. That's a great show. We also get a chance to interview the authors, too, which is a lot of fun. And I do the General Geek Show there called the 602 Club, which is a blast. In fact, I got to say, the most recent episode with Norman Lau talking about The Last Starfighter, a film that owes a lot of its greatness to Star Wars. Totally worth checking out. So, John, I know you're all over the place online, so let everybody know where they can find you, because you've got some nuggets out there.
Wow, that sounds awful, actually, in certain contexts. But if you want any of my nuggets, you can reach out to me on Twitter at KesselJunkie. Actually, that's my name pretty much on every social network. And you can go ahead and you can listen to me on a podcast I co-host with my pal Craig called Words with Nerds. And I'm also over on the Trek FM network co-hosting a show called Stage 9, examining the works of Star Trek creators that they do when they're not making Star Trek. It's really a fascinating little show.
Well, John, I think there's only one thing left to say. I think it's time to close negotiations.
Matthew, negotiations are closed.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.